Hi there. Welcome to the Boardwalk. All right, welcome to the Boardwalk. Is this the inaugural episode or the pilot episode? What do you call the first episode of something?
It's the pilot episode.
Okay,
This is where we judge people's reactions, I think.
So here's the pilot episode of the Boardwalk. I'm Zach. With me are a couple friends of mine from our time in Afghanistan, Kyle and Stu. Say hi, guys.
Hey, what's going on?
There we go. This was an idea that I kind of came up with because there weren't enough podcasts made during this pandemic. So why not do one more? And then was kind of emboldened to go even further with it just because of listening to all these podcasts. And I thought, holy crap, nobody's actually saying anything of any substance, right? I tried to do the whole thing where I listened to a Rachel Maddow podcast, and it sounded like Rachel Maddow's TV show. I did the same thing with Steven Crowder. I tried to go across the entire political spectrum, and it's just a bunch of nonsense talking points, right? So here's the Boardwalk, and the theory behind the name is, or the reasoning behind the name, when we were all in Afghanistan, we would go and we'd grab lunch every day, and after we grabbed lunch, there was we got a half mile around wooden structure, roughly.
Yeah, probably about a half mile wooden structure. Yeah.
It's a wooden covered wooden boardwalk, exactly how it sounds like. And after we'd eat every day, we'd go and we'd do at least 2 laps around it. And we would talk about anything. And it didn't have to be politics or it didn't have to be military related, considering we were in Afghanistan. And one of the things I took away from that is that even if we didn't agree with each other, which was more often than some may think, we never got overly hostile and nobody ever took it personal. And maybe if this thing actually catches on and more than 7 people listen to it, they'll go, oh, look, it's possible to professionally or courteously disagree and then move forward and try to come up with solutions to some of the problems we're facing today.
Shows you can be friends despite it's huge. We need that in today's society.
Just a little bit. And so with that, the biggest news that pertains to the 3 of us is that a couple weeks ago, President Biden announced that after initially saying we weren't going to be leaving Afghanistan by the May 1st deadline, which was a couple days ago at this point, that we'll be leaving by September 11th. And to pretty much serve as a precursor to that, this is kind of an intro episode. We're going to talk about our experiences in Afghanistan and kind of how the country was when we were there and some of the things that we took away from it and how it did or didn't change or improve in the 4 years since most of us left. Kyle left a little bit before we did. So with that said, we'll get it started. And Kyle, you were there first. So how was it when you got there? Other than slightly less bad than when we got there?
I was there first. Yeah. Maybe not when we were there all together. I'd been in Afghanistan the previous year, and then at least a year and a half prior to that, even back in 2014, I had done remote missions. I think that was interesting too. It was the first election where Hamid Karzai was not president, so we did a lot of signals intelligence remotely for the elections going on in 2014. So when the CIA or whoever stuffed those ballot boxes for Ghani and made sure that our man got the seat or whatever.
Listen, only Russia.
Yeah, right.
In elections.
Yeah, no, we don't interfere in elections. That's
don't
Russia
talk to those
only.
Central American banana republicans. That didn't happen.
So that's how I got my start in Afghanistan, doing intelligence that way. After that, 2015, I was there doing MC-12 whiskey signals intelligence aviation missions over Afghanistan. I got out of the Army after that, came back as an political military, a green and white analyst there in Kandahar, and that's where I met Zach and Stu, and we had a lot of interesting conversations. So in 2015, I mean, it was bad. 2014, obviously the elections. I think that might have been the last time there was any sort of optimism in Afghanistan among the people. I mean, a lot of people went out and voted, but then, I mean, they realized their vote didn't count. So Yeah, just a lot of sketchy stuff in that election. So after that, it's pretty much just been a constant deterioration of the situation. I left at the very end of 2016, and I don't do intelligence work anymore. So it's fun looking at it through eyes a few years later. So that's me.
And for those of you out there that may actually listen to this, Kyle had it's like a 6-episode series called Green and White, and he's talking about really the key players in southern Afghanistan, specifically in Kandahar and Uruzgan. And it's a really good introduction into the personality style of leadership in that country. So if you find some time, look up Green and White on Apple. Is it on Spotify as well and all those other hosts?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. I've not looked at it in a couple of years. I need to make sure it's all still up. But
It is. I listened to him the other day.
Oh, good. I'm glad it's still up. But yeah, if you want a better account of that, just read No Good Men Among the Living by Mr. Gopal, who wrote a fantastic book on Uruzgan politics. But anyway, thanks, Zach. That's me.
Mm-hmm. And Stu, you spent some time there before you got there as a contractor as well, right?
Yeah. So I was in the Army prior to contracting. I had 3 sort of quick trips over there with a 3rd Special Forces group, supporting them as one of the intel kids. 2012, and then I was there 2014 in Kabul during the election. So I got to see a lot of the interesting things that took place during the election. A whole lot of fraud. Like Kyle said, you'd think people would kind of understand how little their votes actually mattered the 3 previous elections when they didn't. But there was a lot of optimism going in, seeing 2 different candidates as opposed to the incumbent that was definitely going to win, and then things kind of took a turn for the worse. And as usual, the Taliban liked to push out that messaging when the elections go through and don't go people's ways. So that's always fun. And then I had one last trip in 2016, and then I became a contractor and met up with you guys at the end of 2016. So it was and also my unit was there during the first big attack on Kunduz city, which kind of became a yearly thing after thereafter. It was, I think, like late 2015, early 2016, and then you could basically like count the days till the next time they would send about 1,000 to 5,000 men to overrun the city and then get shut up by us. And
it was like 2015.
Yeah.
Because I was on
my unit was
planes
there
over the city. Yeah, I was there. You were on the ground. I was in the planes. I bet same time.
I was at Bath. That wasn't the area I was covering. It was just my unit. But we ended up dropping on a hospital up there, which made the news. And you always know someone's going to lose their job if the news starts reporting on Afghanistan. So kind of had some badness out there. But I still support that drop. The guys were working with the intelligence they had at the time, and also there were plenty of warnings given out. But I don't know. I get a little heated about that.
Yeah, I mean, I was there. I was there too. The intelligence we had actually in the air over that exact same, what turned out to be a Doctors Without Borders hospital. I mean, we had no way of knowing. I mean, all we saw from the plane day after day after day was just trucks loaded with armed men, like going in and out of buildings. Like, I mean, you can only do so much with that.
What, your doctors don't sling carry AKs?
No, and in the hospitals and offices I work in, no, nobody's got a technical Tacoma loaded down.
But it's Tennessee. You'd think somebody would be packing some heat.
And it was like full on urban, like kind of Iraq warfare down there. Like people were like the teams that went up there were like legit dropping bodies and like getting into huge prolonged firefights. So it was, I don't know, it was a bad situation overall. And I don't know, ultimately, if you're a commander, you'd probably go with trying to protect your guys over anything else at that point. But
Yeah,
I don't know, bad situation that basically became like a yearly tradition for them after it happened, because it was fairly successful at the beginning before they were pushed out. And that's kind of a trend in Afghanistan. If something works, it sort of becomes the new thing until it fails enough.
And two, like, wasn't that mostly another terrorist group, terrorist or insurgent group? Islamic Movement of Uzbekistan was generally who was doing those Kunduz attacks, or at least majorly involved in them, at least in 2015. At least on my target deck, we were mainly going after IMU guys, not Taliban guys up there.
Yeah, I think they are technically terrorists, because the requirement is that you have to be crossing borders, right?
Or jihadists crosses borders to fight. Yeah, so I think a lot of those guys were actually from the Caucasus. So, maybe we'll talk later about it too. But like talking, the SF guys that we supported, like you knew when you were up against the Taliban versus when you knew you were up against some like Chechens, like hardcore trained in actual warfare. They could shoot and bound and do all that kind of stuff. And the Taliban really didn't have that level of tactical know-how.
Yeah, it's always interesting seeing some of the like more professional groups that the Taliban works alongside, and the differences in tactics, because the Taliban just continue to sort of use ant tactics, outside of like specific, good commanders. There's a lot of signs that we are fighting, farmers with AKs. It's interesting.
It's a cheap but effective strategy.
Yeah, got to respect the pajamas, man. Two wars now.
Yeah,
and I think more so now. I don't know about how you guys feel about it, but more so now than probably reading accounts of the early war. I mean, these Talibans are literal. I mean, the Talibs are literal farmers, man. I mean, these commanders are not being plucked from the Mujahideen who fought the Soviets anymore, man. Those guys are old and dying or dead. It's just like it's just young guys who work their way up in the ranks, and they're probably just poppy farmers, to begin with. It's they don't have that that military training that a lot of those early Talib commanders had.
I mean, think about it. Your average young, Taliban fighter grew up under U.S. occupation. Like, it's a completely different dynamic to the old school Muj guys that owned the country at one point,
and still do. I mean, I think to some extent. I mean, is Sayyad still alive over in Western Afghanistan? Is that guy still alive?
Yeah.
As far as I know, he is. Yeah. I don't know.
Well, I was surprised to see that, when they started all this, the negotiations, the name that was coming up was Mullah Barater. And I just thought that dude's been around forever.
Yeah.
He's about as old school as it comes. And he's sitting there, he's leading the negotiation process for the Taliban.
Right. And he wasn't Omar's deputy, right? Muhammad Omar's deputy. Yeah,
he was. He's been in the game for like 30 years, 40 years.
Yeah, he certainly isn't fighting anymore. That's for sure.
No.
He goes and picks up hookers in Dubai and makes deals in Qatar, I suppose. I don't know what he does.
Oh, whatever it is, he's influential enough. They're going to listen to him when he talks.
Yeah, he's about the last of the OG Talibs.
Yeah.
I guess how in depth do we want to get? Because I'm sure
these
people listening might not have any.
These names are probably already flying over the heads.
As long as we explain some of this stuff. So Mullah Barater, back there in the days of Charlie Wilson's war, Mullah Barater was an old school Mujahideen commander. He was operating down in southern Afghanistan, where the rest of the Taliban were. After the Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan, everybody's pretty well aware that the Taliban and what eventually became the Northern Alliance had a 7-year-long civil war, roughly, give or take.
There's just a massive civil war. Yeah, I don't know the exact years of it.
A giant hodgepodge of laying down mines and killing each other. And with that, the Taliban ultimately took power in 96. And Mullah Barater served as one of Mullah Omar, the founder of the Taliban. He served as one of his deputies, and he is old school as they come, and he's still highly revered in the Taliban. It's the equivalent of, I'm not gonna throw out like a Michael Jordan, but if you had a big time basketball player and they came out and like, oh yeah, I'm gonna coach this team now, like, okay, I'm gonna listen to what the hell he's gonna say, right? Like, he knows what he's talking about. He's seen some shit. He did the job. He was one of the first ones to do it, and he did it well. Took down the Soviets, took down the Northern Alliance, took down America, more or less. We'll get to that, either later on in this episode or in episodes to come. But like, Mullah Berader was a big time pipe hitter. He was the shot caller for the Taliban in certain parts of southern Afghanistan. And now he's sitting there. He's their chief negotiator.
Yeah. It's wild. And but yeah, all those Moj guys are dying out, man. I mean, that's a hard life, especially early. I mean, really, Soviet occupation, that was a hard life, and then on into early American occupation. Yeah, I mean, that's a hard life. You die pretty young if you do that. So it's amazing that dude's still around. I mean, but he's not the head of the Taliban. That's still
No.
Akhundzada, isn't it? Habatullah Akhundzada.
Yeah,
He's
for anyone who's never seen like an Afghan, like they live pretty hard lives in general. They're essentially like poorest of the poor mountain people. They're top of mountains, and I think the average yearly income for a family is like $1,000. So it's like people age very very quickly down there. You'll see 30-year-olds that look like they're in their 50s, and so add on top of that a continually escalating in some places conflict that you're living through, and sometimes fighting in part-time, because oftentimes people or in certain areas Taliban will actually work like part-time as Taliban operatives and then part-time as poppy farmers.
Right. Yeah. It's farming and fighting. If you're into the fighting business, I mean, farming doesn't pay all that well. So, I mean, you join up with a little Taliban squad, and then
depends on what you're farming.
Yeah, poppy, but
but even then, you're making good money for a dirt poor farmer. Like the village elders are the ones that make off with the cash there.
Yeah, it's just a whole system of corruption. I mean, all the way up. But we can talk about that later.
Unlike you two, I did not cut my teeth in Afghanistan. I cut mine in Iraq, like a good American soldier was supposed to do. Okay, everybody else went. What was your excuse? I was stationed in Baghdad from October 2010 to what's 9 months after October? July of 2011, and then I spent my last 3 months out in Anbar province. Much preferred Baghdad. I got to work in Saddam Hussein's old movie theater, and so there was air conditioning, and I got to hit golf balls off the top of his palace on Sunday mornings. But it was there's certainly a lot of similarities between Iraq and Afghanistan. But then once I got to Afghanistan and took a couple weeks to get read up on it and understanding it and realizing that we were trying to fight that war the way we were fighting Iraq, it was clear that those similarities are far outweighed by the differences, right? Like in Iraq, they're Iraqis. Whether they're in northern Iraq, southern Iraq, Sunni, Shia, they're Iraqis. At minimum, they're all Arabs, right? You can't even say that about the guys in Afghanistan because they're Tajiks and they're Pashto and they're Durrani and they're all these different subgroups. They don't identify as one, not even a tribe. They identify as sub-tribes, which made what we were doing in Afghanistan even more difficult than what I was trying to do in Iraq. I was in Iraq when back then it was just the Islamic State of Iraq, when they had left town and gone up to Syria. And I remember we were in the closeout unit. Our commander was General Lloyd Austin, the current SecDef. I was pretty happy with his nomination. I don't know if I'm still happy about it 4 months into this tenure. But he was running the show, and I thought we had a pretty smooth withdrawal. Well, as a partial withdrawal, we were still there. We are still there. So that's another lie. Thanks, Dick Cheney. But I remember sitting there I had to write a paper on, kind of sort of a lessons learned one pager, what's going to happen, right? And I was like, I have no damn idea what's going to happen, but I do know that this entire element of Al Qaeda is in Syria now, and it's just going to be a matter of time till they come back, right? Which was it, 2014? They took Mosul in a day, worked their way down to Baghdad, didn't quite make it there. So, like, it was pretty obvious that we had failed in Iraq, and I thought surely, I'll go to Afghanistan as a contractor and things will be different. And then I ran into you two. And
yeah.
And then I started reading the intel and going to the meetings, and this is exactly the same, but completely different at the same time. Before we get into part 2 of this episode, I wanted to provide a little context for some names that we're going to be bringing up. The first of which is Milley. That is a reference to General Mark Milley. At the time that we were in Afghanistan, he was the Chief of Staff of the Army, reported directly to the Chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff. As you may know, General Milley is now the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Second name was Nicholson. That's General John Nicholson. He was the commander of all U.S. forces in Afghanistan, as well as the NATO Operation Resolute Support Mission within Afghanistan. Then we had Madiullah and Rahimullah, who are both members of the Khan family. They both served at one point as provincial chiefs of police for the Uruzgan province in southern Afghanistan. Very influential, more so their family, but they will come back here in future episodes. And then we also had Razik, which is a reference to Abdul Razik, or Abdul Razik Achexai, who was the provincial chief of police for Kandahar province. And at the time of our being in Afghanistan, Abdul Razik was the most, if not one of the most powerful and influential people within the country, and was a major player in the security situation in southern Afghanistan. We will definitely be talking about him in episodes to come.
Is there anything better than a meeting in the intel section, and the entire thing is run by a bunch of 20-something-year-old male civilians? Man, I mean, we would sit there every morning and give a report based on our section. So I did the political military section, and so that's our Afghan allies, and I like to put allies in quotation marks. And then and you guys did the Red Force stuff and the in whatever provinces you guys were working at the time. So yeah, it would be an entire boardroom with the lieutenant colonel at the head of the table and all of us sitting around and giving him a report. The amount of stuff we could spin up based off of intelligence was absolutely insane, and too much power for a 20-year-old.
Oh yeah.
What do you guys think?
Oh, I completely agree. And at the same time, I'd be a little more cynical. Well, I don't know, maybe the words, I'd be a little less cynical if they ever listened to our recommendations, man. Like, do you remember when Milley came in? Remember that shit?
Oh my gosh.
Milley came in and the boss is like, what do I tell him? Like, tell him the fucking truth.
Tell him the truth, right? Yeah, tell him the truth. And that's the big issue with intel, right?
And what did he say?
Who? Colonel Leesman?
Truth doesn't sound good.
Yeah, I don't remember what he said.
He said the Taliban are staring defeat in the face.
Staring defeat in the face. Was that Milley that said that? I thought that was Nicholson that said
Nicholson said it at the SIGAR briefing.
Okay.
And then the boss said it like 2 weeks later when Milley came into town. And Milley called him out on it.
Yeah, Taliban are staring defeat in the face, which couldn't be further from the actual truth. And
but
that was the craziest thing for me, because I was coming from like a tactical unit. Like the cool thing with SF is that their leadership isn't really giving like status updates to Congress as much. They're more like letting the conventional leadership know, hey, we're doing this and killing people and whatnot. So it was more of a focus on like action-based tactical operations going after specific people, and you didn't have to convince anybody that things were bad. And then suddenly coming over to the conventional side of the table where things are actually getting briefed at like a high level to Congress and like letting the decision makers in Washington know what to do. You suddenly essentially being ignored half the time, and the other half of the time they want you to revise your truthful statements to something more palatable for them.
Oh, absolutely. That was my job. Like toward the second half of the time I was over there, was just rewriting Colonel Leesman's briefings to the general. Like, I would get all of your guys' input. I would have to make this speech, this briefing, and I would have to go in and talk to him for like an hour and a half, and he would be like, "Oh, that sounds bad. Can we edit that? That's not.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's gonna make me look bad."
Were you there when he
wasn't
mad at us? He was just upset.
Yeah, I probably, because I was there the entire time he was there.
There was a day he pulled. Stu, were you there?
I think I had to have been.
There was a day he pulled. I think it may have been me, Dan, and Matt. He pulled us in. I think you were there, Kyle. I'm pretty sure
I was 100% sure. If I was there, if I was writing his briefings, I can guarantee you I was in that meeting.
He pulled in somebody from each provincial team. I'm pretty sure he pulled you in, and he didn't like the write up at all. And he's like,
"That was it." Yeah,
like, guys, I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. I thought, oh man, I let him down.
Yeah, because he's like a grandfather. Yeah, like a grandfather.
He was great to work for. He was really good to work for.
Chill. Yeah.
But at the same time, that interaction with him and Millie when he came to us is a perfect metaphor. I'll use metaphor. It's a perfect metaphor for the entire Afghan war. It's like there's so much bad going on, and then you had General Nicholson, who he was running the show through the entire Afghan theater when we were there, and all of a sudden the requirements for success changed from owning district centers to provincial centers, right? Well, the Afghans owned pretty much every provincial center. They probably owned half of the district centers in the entire country.
Yeah, so for listeners listening, I mean, Afghanistan is divided up into provinces, which are think of it like a United States, like a state, and then those provinces are divided up into districts. So,
like counties.
Like a county. So like there's a county head, which is like a district capital, and then there's a provincial capital, which would be like the capital of the state. So whenever Zach was just talking about, the Taliban, we basically changed it to owning provincial capitals. That would be like saying, well, the United States is firmly under U.S. government control because we have government presence in Nashville, Tennessee. But what about the rest of the state? That's kind of what he was talking about.
I mean, they could have Nashville at this point.
Yeah.
My music taste has shifted to Austin, so.
Oh, okay. Yeah, red dirt country. That's different. Well, that could be a whole different podcast, Zach. We could sit here and talk about country music for days, man.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's like in the movie Red Dawn. If the Ruskies had completely taken over your town, but you and the mayor were holed up in the mayor's office, technically under the way we were supposed to be like basing our assessments, that was still in the positive range. It was like a 3 out of 5. And like these things get pushed to Congress like that, and people who were in charge of like the systems that we used to judge different districts and provinces and threat levels specifically set things up like that. So, okay, this district has essentially fallen. The governor is alive, but he's completely ineffective, but he's alive. So all of these other things bad, he's alive. That keeps us on the positive end, and that ended up skewing so many of my analyses.
Oh, it is absolutely maddening, And I remember when it finally came that some of those districts in northern Kandahar fell. And again, for those listening, Kandahar is the symbolic historical capital of the Taliban. Right? It is strategically important, but it's also important from a standpoint of sentiment, especially for the Taliban. You've got
Mullah Omar was born there.
yes,
And he
You've got-
raised the cloak of the Prophet Muhammad and basically declared he had God's rule to run the country,
allegedly.
allegedly.
So you had, it's important from a standpoint of symbolism. That's why the Taliban focused most of their efforts in the south. You also have the Ring Road, like one of the very few hardball roads, and it went around the entire damn country. And then down there in southern Afghanistan was, the poppy fields. All right, so it's important in so many different ways. And I remember we started losing districts, and not our version of, or not the skewed version of, well, you lost the district, but the boss is still in charge. Like, we were losing districts. There was no district center anymore and stuff like that. And Tolo News, which is one of the local Afghan news sources, they're all over it, right? Tolo's half decent. And for those of you listening, if you ever want to get an idea of what's going on in Afghanistan, hit up Tolo or maybe even Kama, which is Khaama. They got some half decent access to what's going on, right? So, we're sitting there, we're losing districts left and right. And at the same time, I'm sitting there working on a provincial assessment, and they're like, well, no, it's still green. Like, it's not green. Well, it's green because we still have Kandahar City. We are cut off on 3 sides, and the news is reporting all this stuff. We can't get supplies up to Uruzgan, which is the province north of Kandahar, because
Still
the Taliban, still can't, by the way, because like 2 months after, 2 or 3 months after I got there, the Taliban just took over the Kandahar-Uruzgan highway. We called it Route Bear, right? They just took it over, and the solution was to build a new highway around the mountains to get up to Uruzgan, except they never actually built a highway. They just kind of cleared some rock, so it's just a dirt fucking road. And now you have a dirt road. Well, we're up in the mountains in Afghanistan. It snows just like every other mountain range known to civilization. So what do you think happens then? The Taliban are just taking pot shots at these Afghan guys trying to get north and south. And so what happens? They stop trying to go north and south. We stopped going up to Uruzgan. Like, all these things happened. It was a shit show from day one.
And I still remember, maybe very early in my time as a contractor and a political analyst, is I was learning from Mike, who had made this assessment that Uruzgan was fairly safe, and he reported it to the lieutenant colonel. And I do remember very distinctly the next morning when the Uruzgan provincial capital was under attack, and the governor was calling us with machine gun fire in the background. And old Mike, the guy replaced, he had just briefed the general or whatever that Uruzgan was fairly secure, and here we are a day later, and it's just machine gun fire from the governor, the governor's mansion. Like, it absolutely wild, dude, how fast the Taliban moved into that. And then the whole thing, Razik is his own episode. I mean, all these figures are their own episode, but just the control of that highway and just. It's so important, and yet we cannot reclaim it. I love that the American solution was to simply build another highway rather than just take it back, because it's just impossible to do so.
To be fair, that wasn't the American solution. So when Brandon and I got into work that day, I'm not going to include Andrew. When Brandon and I got into work that day, we'd seen the reports. It was over the news that the Taliban had taken the road. And our first words, Brandon and I both said, clear the highway. There's no alternative. You have to clear the highway. And we were getting pushback. And so I never raised my voice. I never got angry. I got angry once, but that's a separate issue. But that was the time where I got into the boss's face and I said, we need to clear the fucking highway because there's no alternative. It's a hardball road from Kandahar to Uruzgan through mountains and in strategically important places. There's no alternative. And the answer was, well, Razik's on the scene. We're going to build a new road.
Yeah, it's I don't know. That's that was a rough thing, and really that was mainly what we dealt with. At least me, from like Paul Mill's side, was just that freaking road from Kandahar to Uruzgan, and just how horribly managed that was. Plus, Yeah, it was bad time.
Yeah, and so you have that happen, and then Aruzgan is just they're left to their own devices. God knows what they're doing up there, Stu.
Stu was the Aruzgan. Didn't
He
you
was.
stop being the Aruzgan analyst after a while, though, Stu? Wasn't that moved
no,
to somebody else's? Did Dan take over that? What's
No,
Dan?
no.
do?
Dan was the Aruzgan analyst when I got there, and I kind of fell in on him. So after he left, I took it over full time. But
I hope
yeah,
Dan's
no,
okay.
I just read the news, man. As soon as I got there, the Taliban were like, "Stu's here. Time to take down this province." And it was pretty impressive the way they did it. I mean, they essentially cut off the provincial capital, which is of course located directly in the center of this weird sort of oblong, horizontally shaped province, and they
It's just
said,
like
all these
mountains.
roads that go to these other districts would be pretty easy to hold, and they decided to cut off access to all of the surrounding districts and access to Kandahar, and then they just started implementing good old Sharia law, and they're still doing that. That's sort of how things went, and we did what we were able to do, which is pretty limited at the time, and it just sort of fell apart. It's really unfortunate. Would have been nice if that connecting highway could have been taken care of, but that's the way things are.
Oh.
And unfortunately, the Taliban seem to be really good at strategically removing key leadership right before they swoop in and take over areas, and they so the way that Razik, the guy we were talking about, was sort of like a big power broker down in Kandahar. They
Most powerful
essentially
man in
took out
Afghanistan.
Easily.
Easily, yeah.
They essentially took out his sort of counterpart up in Aruzgan right before doing it, and that's actually the part of the subject of Kyle's Green and White podcast.
Which one was that?
Really great listen.
It wasn't
Matullah Khan.
Yeah, I say because it wasn't Ramiullah.
Yeah.
He was useless.
Rahimullah Khan was maybe the most useless man in Afghanistan. However, his uncle Madiullah was very good. Yeah, his uncle Madiullah was very.
He just didn't have it in him to be a hard ass.
I don't know what Rahimullah was doing. I don't know, because he certainly was not paying his people.
Didn't he tell the Taliban that his brother was seeing that girl in Kabul and got him killed?
What, really? I'm not.
I saw that. I know I saw that somewhere, that it's possible that. So real quickly, this will probably be a full episode on itself, but Madiullah Khan, the big power broker in Aruzgan, had a little girl on the side in Kabul, and then one time when he was going to visit her, he got killed by the Taliban. It happens, but
we're all human.
I had read somewhere that it's possible. It was theorized by a bunch of people, like there were rumors spreading everywhere after he died, because he was a major figure, that it might have been his brother Rahimullah Khan who told the Taliban where he was going to be.
And Rahimullah, dude, let's be honest. But my favorite was the story that Razik met up with Rahimullah and beat him up. because if there was anybody that needed to be beat up, it was Rahimullah Khan.
That was during the highway debacle, wasn't it?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Because he
kept mucking it up. Yeah.
Yeah. That was Rahimullah's duty, and Razik took it over. Like, Razik was not supposed to be in charge of that highway. That was Rahimullah Khan's deal. And because Rahimullah was terrible, Madiullah was a really good strong man. Rahimullah was not, and Razik had to take over that highway from him. I think part of that, eventually led to Razik's demise, I think. But what a mess! What an absolute mess!
Oh yeah. But even before the cons, like we talk about the Taliban making moves before they do something, everybody forgets about September 9th, 2001. And that's when they took out Ahmad Shah Massoud. Right? Like he was
right.
If Ahmad Shah Massoud was the leader of the Northern Alliance, it was like the last vestige of any opposition to the Taliban. And I still believe to this day, because Ahmad Shah Massoud had a unique ability to unite people of different tribes, which is goddamn near impossible in Afghanistan. He was able to unite people for a common cause to rise up against this force, that force being the Taliban. If the Taliban don't take him out on September 9th, there is no September 11th. Like, this is it is a tried and true TTP of theirs. None of this happens if Ahmed Shah Massoud is still alive, right? Like, Afghanistan's still a pretty shitty place to live, but the literacy rate's probably closer to 65%. It's still the most mined country in the world if he's still alive. It doesn't get much better, but it is a tried and true Taliban TTP that they got to take out some big hitter before they make a move. But they've been pretty successful in doing it over the last 20 years.
Yeah, Taliban are pretty good at assassinating people. I mean, and it goes back to the old adage, right? You have to get lucky every time, and they just have to get lucky once. And if you're at the top of their list, I mean, how many assassination attempts, even while we were there, did Razik survive?
3, 4?
At least 3 or 4. Like,
I remember
they tried to take him out with what, a 2-star or 3-star general, like U.S. general, while he was there.
No, they did take him out.
That was when they killed him. Yeah, they almost got that.
That was when they killed him.
Yeah,
that was.
I thought he survived. No, he survived that one. That was the one that he survived.
You're right. Miller was a
there.
4-star. You're right. So that's when Razik was hosting that dinner or whatever. And
they put a bomb under his chair.
Yeah. That was after I left, though, right?
It might have been after you left, but like his SUV had signal jammers, so they couldn't detonate it until after he left. Like, it was insane. But like, we used to say all the time that all it took to kill, the reason why the Taliban couldn't kill General Razik is because they kept trying to do it in the most elaborate way possible. And how do they end up killing him? They walked up and shot him in the back of the fucking head.
Right.
They finally figured it out.
I read,
which was kind of ironic because that's kind of a Razik thing to do. Like, he was a guy that handled business himself.
They infiltrated his bodyguard. I mean, that's all they had to do was pay off one of the bodyguards, and that was it. I mean, how simple. Like, why did they not do that before? They just said, well, can you shoot Razik? And Razik was, at least according to the report I read, was carrying a crate of pomegranates out of the governor's mansion. And he was carrying a crate of pomegranates that got shot up with an AK, man. That was it.
That's why I don't eat pomegranates.
Well, they're a pain in the ass to eat, for sure.
Yeah, they are. Holy crap.
But, brutal. What an absolutely brutal demise. But I mean, it's the whole live by the sword, die by the sword thing. I mean, there was no way out for him. I mean, he was going to have to die. It's just a matter of when.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, but that was how it was in Afghanistan. Like, the entire time we were there, you had lawless wasteland, and then you'd have 1 or 2 guys in certain parts of the country who were kind of holding things down. Where we were at, it was Razik. Razik was the guy that kept order or relative order in southern Afghanistan, and that came with a huge cost. When you look at things like opium production, when you look at enemy freedom of movement, there were trade-offs for all these decisions. And Razik aside, we were able to take the information that was available to us, present it to the powers that be, and say, here's what we need to do. I mean, it got to a point, we developed a 5-year plan. And we built out this plan, which was, I think it was so stupid to build a 5-year plan in Afghanistan. That's a giant waste of my time. But like, we built it, and I remember us looking at it and going, this could work. The only problem is you need a fighting force that's willing to do it, right? I think like we built that plan, and the next week is when they took the highway. So, I mean, it's just a giant precursor to what was to come in this conflict. Well, what was to come for us? We're 15 years into it by then, and from all the reading I've done, there was no difference. I read The Forever War by Dexter Filkin, and he was there in like 06, 07. He was there when the Taliban ran the damn country. Nothing's changed. Right? Like, it's still the same lawless wasteland that's ran by the tribes.
Right. And it always will be.
Going back to Alexander, no one has governed Afghanistan successfully.
Like, I'm telling you, like one of the best books I've read, and I read it this year, was No Good Men Among the Living, and it covers about 5 or 6 different people. It was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize, and it's just absolutely fantastic.
Who wrote it?
Really, Anand Gopal. I think he's an Indian writer, and he covers it's basically about 4 or 5 different people in the Afghan war, and basically how the Taliban fell and then rose again. That's one of the themes of it, right? So it just talks about like this lingering U.S. invasion, lack of economic opportunity and stuff that forced these guys that had basically given their weapons up. They had nothing else to do, and they went right back to it. And it's very interesting because he interviews Taliban commanders in that book, and he interviews women in that book, and just it's wild. He talks about the Mahdiullah Khan, debacle, and all that. John Muhammad Khan, he talks about him, JMK and MK. So
He was their uncle, right?
Yeah, John Muhammad Khan, I think, was Mahdiullah's uncle, and Rahimullah, I think, was his brother. I think I got that wrong earlier in this episode. I'm sorry. That a lot of family ties, but John Muhammad.
It's possible that they're brothers and uncles at the same time. It's Afghanistan.
It's Afghanistan, right? Yeah, very possible. Very possible.
Hillbilly skin,
especially southern Afghanistan.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, you touched on it at the beginning, though, Zach. Is that it's not really a country. It's like 4 or 5 countries in one. And,
at minimum, it's 4 or 5 countries.
It's like Ahmad Shah Massoud. He might have been able to unite people that weren't Pashtuns against the Taliban, but the Taliban had an absolute mandate to rule from the southern Afghanistan.
Oh yeah,
especially from the rural parts. Like, I mean, what do you do? And they'll take it right back. I mean, easily the Taliban will take it right back.
Oh, without question. I sit here looking at it, and I'm reading, just reading the stuff that like President Biden put out, and his office is maybe a week after they decided that they were going to be leaving Afghanistan. They came out with just the most absurd quote regarding just like where we are with Afghanistan. Because the initial reason we went to Afghanistan was to combat Al Qaeda, right? And
right.
Unlike every war since World War II, everybody was pretty much on board with that. Like, there was universal message. I was 13 years old when it happened. I don't remember hearing anybody say, no, we shouldn't go get Al Qaeda, right? Like, it was, everybody agreed. And so here's a quote from Joe Biden's office on May 2nd. As we bring to an end America's longest war and drawdown, the last of our troops from Afghanistan, Al Qaeda is greatly degraded there. What the fuck is he talking about?
I don't think Al Qaeda is degraded whatsoever.
No, they're more, if anything, they're more global, and so we don't look at Al Qaeda the same way we used to. We used to look at Al Qaeda as this Islamic extremist group that operated in Afghanistan, but now they focus a lot more of their efforts on places like Indonesia, Western Africa, Eastern Africa, for that matter. But they're just as lethal in Afghanistan as they've ever been.
I mean, hell, they outlasted ISIS and emerged more powerful than before, essentially.
Yeah, it
like that was their biggest their biggest sort of rival in the past 20 years, and getting past them, they are like the biggest Islamic I guess jihadist group in the world.
Yeah, and it's crazy sitting here seeing that the president writes that when you guys ever read the Long War Journal?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think Bill and Tom are great, right? And I'll sit there and I'll read their stuff, and they've been on this since we were in Afghanistan. This whole idea that Al Qaeda is not there is like, why are we killing Al Qaeda commanders in Farah? And for people listening, when you look at Afghanistan is kind of that, it's like an off-center diamond shape, right? Like, and really the Taliban power was always traditionally focused on the southern part of the country, and to an extent, what we call like the middle eastern part of the country, central eastern part of the country. Well, Farah is not in that area. It's one of the more western areas, borders Iran, not necessarily what you would consider to be a Taliban or Al Qaeda stronghold. And we're killing Al Qaeda commanders, not members, commanders in Farah and Herat and these western Afghanistan provinces that never really had a significant Taliban presence until probably around the time you guys and I were there. So to say that they're degraded is just a lie. They're not degraded. They're probably stronger than they've been in quite some time.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you basically have a permissive environment to operate, and what I've said about really Afghanistan or any of the wars we've been involved in is like the only way to really win against this is like a generations long occupation, and forcing into Western values, and no one's willing to do that, man. And so if that's really the only way to win, we're not there. We're not going to do it. And there can be no victory. It's the Taliban take it today or they take it 100 years from now. It's just,
this isn't the liberation of Holland, right? Where we're going to institute a parliament and they're going to have a prime minister. Like that's not how it works in Afghanistan. One, success is very hard to define because success changed over the years, right? Success at first was driving out Al Qaeda, which we got them to the point. It took 3 months, and they're ready to negotiate. And then Donald Rumsfeld said, "Nah, we're going to keep fighting."
Yeah,
right. But it's always changed. So this idea that we're going to have a no conditions withdrawal, I'm intrigued. We'll see. I don't know if it'll happen or not, but we'll see.
Yeah, they'll come up with something to prevent it. But I mean, I do hope for a withdrawal. I think pretty much all of us here at the podcast will promote a withdrawal. I mean, because the effect is the same one way or the other. You can either pull the Band-Aid off now, or you can pull the Band-Aid off in 10 years. Same result.
Yeah, I mean,
not me, man. 4 more years. Let's go.
4 more years, man. We're gonna turn it around in 4 more years with 5,000 troops and a bunch of contractors.
I need a grandfather and grandson to be in the same war.
Well, let's see. My parents were in Afghanistan. I was in Afghanistan.
Wow, really?
Yeah. My dad. So,
dang,
when the 101st rolled in, they replaced the 82nd. Or the 82nd replaced the 100. When the 101st rolled in, they built their giant Tory because that's what they do. And I remember telling my dad about it. Like, oh, yeah, the 101st is here. The first thing they did was build a giant-ass Tory. And he sent me pictures of when he took their old Tory in 2002 and cut it up to make mailbox sorting slots. But yeah, my parents were there. I was there. I'm not planning on my son to be there. He's 6, so time will tell.
2 generations of people should not be fighting the same war.
No.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah,
but then again, Afghanistan's on their 4th generation.
That's true, man. They die young. Hey guys, thanks for listening to the Boardwalk. On the next episode, we're gonna probably talk about some of our own personal experiences in Afghanistan, both as a contractor and in the U.S. military. And then we'll probably branch off from that to some more complex topics. So. I hope you guys stick around and enjoy it. These first 2 episodes are going to be kind of an introduction to your podcast hosts, and we'll go for something a